Today's guest is Elhag Paul. Elhag is a South Sudanese political commentator who currently resides in the UK. In the last decade, Elhag Paul has written prolifically on South Sudan. He vehemently opposes the Kir regime. Elhag Paul believes that the SPLM and its offspring should be completely removed from the center stage of South Sudanese politics, and indeed the governance of South Sudan altogether. Elhag Paul believes deeply that the South Sudanese should be awakened to this idea.
Welcome, Elhag, to South Sudan Footprints. This is the second series. I had a guest previously. You are my second guest. Could we start by just allowing you to let people know who you are? Who is Elhag Paul? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What are your influences?
First of all, I think I should thank you for inviting me to this program and for having me on this program. I think if I could start just by saying, obviously, you remember our Khartoum days when we were in St. Francis and you were in Vilna Gilda and all Komboni.
We met in Komboni.
That forms part of who we are, and it shaped who we are. We've taken bits from that part of our lives, which forms our identity. But anyway, I was born in Juba. I was born in Juba, and I'm born to my mother, who comes from both my mother and father. They come from Yei River district.
Okay.
I grew up as a little boy, born in Juba, grew up in South Sudan. We came to Khartoum, and then there was Komboni, and then back to South, and then there was the upheavals of the struggles then, and then the further movements out of the country, and then back, and so on and so forth. Basically, just like any other South Sudanese, most of us of that age, of that era, are people who grew up in turmoil because of the history of Sudan and where we found ourselves. So, in terms of who I am, having given that background, I think I'm shaped by the events of Sudan. If I was born in any other place, my life would be completely different, and I would be in a different stage in the hierarchies of things. And I think so does this apply to all other South Sudanese. I think the fact that we found ourselves in Sudan, we were so much disadvantaged by what befell us as a people, and that has shaped me, particularly in terms of my views about the world, about that it is shaped by that. And obviously, refuge is part of our life, and we've been in refuges, different places, and even where we are right now, it's still the continuation of that. Also, partly one would say, okay, there is some difference in terms of people have gone out and gotten dual citizenship or triple citizenship or whatever, but it's still we are shaped by the events of what befell our country. And to me, it's not only that, because that's not only what shaped me. Actually, I would rather put myself that I was shaped by forces of world politics, because it was the international politics that created Sudan, and Sudan created who I was. Thank you.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Thank you for that brief biography. I hope really people will be able to put that in context with what you're going to say. I think what you've said is not completely different from us, as you well say. We met in Komboni, as you know, and I totally agree with you. Even to this day, we are still a displaced people. Even though we are here, we've had our children here, but we are still a displaced people, because our place should be back home, where a lot can be done. The way I really envisage this program working is, when I have my guest, I really don't want to be driving the program. The program should be driven by you, the interview. So this is really a platform for you to pick maybe a topic, maybe one or two major areas really that concern you regarding our country, and to be able for you to pitch your view to the South Sudanese around the globe really, who would be able to hear your view, because I believe that unless we speak to each other, we had a dialogue, and we listen to each other, we would not be able to surmount the challenges that are ahead of us. Yes, I mean, many people might argue that, colonialism came and created artificial boundaries across Africa, often completely dividing the same nation in half or in 3 or 4 parts, and pushing them into different territories, administrative territories that the Europeans created for their own benefit and not for us. And when they left, we are left trapped in those territories. But there's also a positive way of looking at that. That these territories that we have inherited from colonialism have really now been entrusted to the African elite to do something positive with. And that positive thing is creating functioning, stable, progressive, and hopefully fast-growing states, modern states, made up of a variety of people, variety of nationalities, whom by all means are also interconnected in many other ways, but not necessarily a single nationality. So it's really what we are experimenting with throughout Africa is creating one single country out of diverse nationalities, which is really unity in diversity. And this is the challenge for us in South Sudan. It failed in Sudan. South Sudan now is just another opportunity for the South Sudanese elite to think of or to make a success of. So my attempt is to bring a variety of views, because at the moment, of course, we are not winning against these challenges of division and war and violence. So dialogue is the only solution. And that's really what motivated me to start this program and have platforms so as many people as possible. So the floor is you, my brother. And what I want you to do is focus on one or two things that you really want to pitch. And as we go along, we'll have a conversation. I'll ask you the occasional question, but really the aim is for you to speak your mind. And then there will be another opportunity, me and you will meet again when the audience would have come back with questions for you to further allow you to elaborate what you have said.
Thank you. I think I first would like to say that you've started a great program because I think I believe that dialogue and exchanges is the way forward in everything. If you don't have those, then you're not moving anywhere, you only regress. And I think by starting this program, you're starting a very good thing for the people of South Sudan to start conversing, to start dialoguing face to face, and face their demons. For quite a long time, we've not been honest with ourselves to address the real issues of what has made our country to be what it is. We have hidden ourselves in groups and completely allowed ourselves to be made monsters of by group pressures and group views, rather than people coming out and pointing on what's the truth and what's not the truth. And this I think is one of the biggest problems that has pushed us ages back. As I was talking to you earlier, if you remember our days in Khartoum and our days in Komboni, and how nobody spoke of a tribe. We were all brothers and sisters. We're running here to the Catholic club with all those festivities. We're doing everything. Nobody referred to anybody, with a tribe. We only saw ourselves as, good friends and people getting along. And I wish those days could be replicated. But it's unfortunate that some of us who were in those days actually became the perpetuators of what's happening in our country. And I don't know whether they do reflect about those. And so this program, I hope that in future it really builds up to become a bigger one that will encompass and bring other people in for the ideas to develop and, filter back home so that, we can have a human development, and which will result into developing a country that is really for all. So what I'm going to be talking about mostly, and I would like, to just to set it forward, would be, we are already in a hole, and rather than getting out of that hole, we are digging deeper and deeper and deeper, just as the maxim that is said, when you are in a hole, don't dig. But we seem to be digging deeper and deeper and getting into more holes. So for me, it's getting out of that hole. And so I'm thinking all the time now about the South Sudan that we want. What South Sudan do we want, and how that South Sudan should look like? There are many other people who are thinking around the subject, and they have talked about it. And some of them have talked about it in passing and may not have given it deeper thing. But I think that's what I'm thinking about it now so seriously than in any other, And so to me, I think we need to talk about what can, bring a South Sudan that is a mother to everybody, like a parent to everybody, a South Sudan that is workable, the South Sudan that works for everyone within that territory, and for an individual and for an average South Sudanese to be thinking about what's the common good, without thinking that, this is my brother, this is my uncle, this is my nephew, or this comes from where I am. It's about thinking about humanity, about the human being, because brotherhood, tribes, and what have you, these are just labels, such social labels. But essentially, the individual is a human being who has rights and has needs. Like you have those rights, I have those rights. We are human. That's what makes us human. Why then do we tear ourselves down on the label of tribalism? And so what I want is, we need to be talking about the national good, and how do we create that common good with the national mentality, a common mentality that is mature, that knows where we are heading. Because the current rulers in South Sudan, unfortunately, and I just want to say, they as it is said in the Holy Book, they do not know what they are doing. They really do not know what they are doing. Forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. They are destroying the country, and in the process they are destroying themselves, and in the process they are making enemies of every person in the country, and even some of them outside the country. And it is this mentality which was brought through decades of SPLM indoctrination that has now created a mindset in South Sudan which promotes criminality, from top leadership, political leadership, whether down to the last person. We are imbued now by criminal thoughts, and we see it as normal. It has become the norm. Now South Sudan cannot continue like that, and South Sudan has to change its trajectory. And so there is a need for not liberating the country at the moment. From my view, there is a need for liberating the person who has encompassed views which are so destructive to them. Okay, these people, if they are not liberated mentally and they are brought back to link with humanity, I do not see how a country can develop. Because development is not buildings, it's not the skyscrapers, it's not the good roads, it's not, no. Development is the individual, how they think, how they relate to others, how they handle their environment. Globally now, there is this big issue of environment, how science is destroying environment. We are gifted because at home we are more nearer to nature, we respect nature. So development is about respecting yourself, respecting the nature, caring about the other person. If those values were to be brought to life, this SPLM government would have built good hospitals to show the care that we care for each and everyone. It would have developed the good education systems and built very good schools to produce people who think dynamically and think about the good of the country and link people together. People who would not think and say, I come from Juba, I don't know somebody who lives in Jebelen or in Reng. I don't know. I don't care about that person. We would have somebody who's thinking that whether they're in Nimule, they will think, oh, in Kafia Kinji, that's a fellow countryman, and they need services like I do. These services I have, they must have it. So there has to be equality of service, and there would be equality in everything, and there would be respect for human life. Now, we have gone down to the bottom of what humanity is. And that is the way we have become the enemies of ourselves. We are destroying ourselves. The gruesome things that happen in South Sudan, whereby we are slaughtering ourselves, is slaughtering children, is slaughtering somebody simply because they don't come from your tribe. The level of abuse in its extremity that's taking place in our country is something that I do not think any other South Sudanese had imagined. Because when we fought Khartoum, all of us were brothers and sisters in the struggle. We wanted a South Sudan that would encompass everybody. What has happened to that? Why has that all of a sudden disappeared? With a group of people now claiming to be, they are born to rule, and they must hold everything. And if you try to compare that with what is happening in Sudan, there is no difference at all. Because when we were in Khartoum, when we were in Sudan, if you are not a Muslim, you cannot head any office. And you are automatically a slave, Abid. Although they never did the things that we are now doing to ourselves, they did it to a certain extent. If we refuse to be in Sudan, because I, as a Christian of any other denomination, cannot lead an office or cannot be a president to that country, didn't have a stake in it. And so we launched that struggle. Now, if then we come to South Sudan and you have somebody saying, oh no, I'm born to rule, you must be my slave all the time, I'm the one to rule, you can't rule. And then you monopolize the entire bureaucracy of the government with one people, leaving 62 people, 62 tribes out. One tribe only monopolized the entire bureaucracy, followed by another perhaps tribe. Now the question would be, and which has come to the mind of many people, there are many people now who are asking that we must separate out of that South Sudan because we cannot see a future for ourselves in it. Now, I do not agree with that. I do not agree with that thinking at all. Okay, and I've got my own reasons. There is a day we can discuss that. I don't agree with it. I agree. I believe that what we have in front of us must be fixed.
You can say why you disagree.
Well, I disagree with it because it's not a solution. One, the dynamics that fosters separation are not wholly available in South Sudan. Okay, there is one group that has imposed itself on the people. You cannot break a country because of one group of people. We need to come all together, take these people who are saying they want to sit on top of others, take them aside and say, you, our brothers and sisters, that's not the way to do it. That's not the way to do it, and you must change that mentality. And I think it takes us back to when we started this conversation that we need to have. We need to talk. We need to open minds. Their minds need to be open. For if you remember, I said, they know not what they are doing. They need to be brought to understand that actually they know not what they are doing. And I don't even need to emphasize that because they've destroyed the country already. What more evidence do you want? They've destroyed the country. They've handed the sovereignty of South Sudanese to foreigners. Technically, South Sudan is not a sovereign state at the moment. All the decisions you take. Now, and these are people who call themselves rulers. Really? Rulers? You don't know what you're doing in your house and you call yourself a ruler? Early 90s. When we were, you remember, I used to work, your dad, myself, your older brother, we used to be roaming these British institutions about the case of South Sudan on a daily basis. I hope you remember that.
Yeah, I know.
Your late brother, with your late father, okay,
Yeah.
and your brother. All the institutions around here, whenever there was something about the case of South Sudan, we were there, we stood on it, okay? We propagated for SPLM. And at that time, if you remember now, the current leader of the so-called Young Council of Elders, Ambrose Ring, when he was running a CAP in Camden, when he was running a CAP in Camden, when we were doing most of those things, he was still even running CAPs in Camden. Now, I would have expected that people like those should have gone away from here with the ideas that you and I and all the rest propagated in the British institution. And if you remember the day we went to British Arts Center when Torabi went and his wife denigrated us there, I thought that those days, what we were fighting for, those values are the values that should have transferred in South Sudan. But look at what's coming out of South Sudan. And I think the lesson that we get out of this is that we have failed. All right, and I'm as a South Sudanese, all of us have failed. But SPLM has never been a force for good. You remember in the 90s, in the 90s, I was in the SPLM. All of us were in the SPLM, but I was constantly challenging the movement at that time. Remember, those of Nicola who understand now, I was challenging the abuses of SPLM at that time within the SPLM. All right, I never kept quiet, even when I was in SPLM. And when I left the SPLM because of the brutalities of SPLM under the Dinga people in Eastern Equatoria, I kept highlighting that this movement will destroy us and destroy itself in the process. I even wrote about it, okay? And lo and behold, they've destroyed the country, but they are now destroying themselves, if you look at it carefully. And what is so interesting is those who were fighting the SPLM when we were in SPLM are the SPLM now and destroying the SPLM, right? The NCPs The NCPs in the persons like people like Tutkeo and the others, Tormawen and the rest, those who were with Khartoum fighting us, all right? They used every negative word on the SPLM at that time. They are now the ones using every beautiful word for SPLM to destroy itself.
How did the SPLM end there?
That's a very good question. If you remember when we were talking about, the internal resistance we tried to put for SPLM to stop the abuses, to begin to think, in a national way, and some people ignored it. Those offshoots and the emergence of those ideas which promoted negative policies gained traction because SPLM wasn't applying the law as it should be. People who abuse others ended up being promoted rather than being punished, as an example. That has been in the history of SPLM throughout. People who go to Khartoum, endangering the lives of South Sudanese, when they come back, they end up being promoted. And this has become a culture in South Sudan, whereby now defection is part of the politics of South Sudan. And I just cannot understand it, how somebody moves from one place to another place and keeps vacillating.
So
and gets promoted on both ways.
We are rewarding bad behavior.
Thank you. There we are.
And why is that, you think?
And that is because the people who are supposed to be the rulers use the gun wrongly. Because when they had the gun, they thought they are law unto themselves and they can do whatever they want to do. And in the process of that, it was the tribalists who gained power by exploiting that environment, because it became an environment of fear, whereby you could not act without looking at your back, and you could not say a word without having somebody who can defend you. So it became an issue of cliques. And when you are operating in that environment, then you know what transfers out of it is what we have at the moment. And so SPLM is at the root cause of the problems that we are facing now. SPLM is at the root cause. And I'm sure in the posterior, historians will come to point at that. And it's very interesting, if I can just take you a little bit back to, is it 2018? Yeah, I think 2018. When SPLM did its convention in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Okay, where everybody was wearing red hat and red T-shirt, with the president, being presenting as youth-like, exhibiting his energy and all that. That speech that the president gave, Mawan, any South Sudanese intellectual who is honest will acknowledge that it contains the root causes of South Sudan.
What did the president say on that day?
Well, the president said that they had planned from a long time ago. So going to the roots of SPLM, SPLA. And of course, Kir is being spoken about as one of the main founders, but Nyaba thinks differently, So there again is some, when you're dealing with things which you don't know the origins, everything becomes flimsy because you don't know where the bases are. Where does it start from? Anything without foundation is questionable. And the foundation of Kir himself in the SPLM, with the claims that he's one of the founder, is questionable. And that even tells you that SPLM itself is questionable, because we don't know what SPLM really is. In that speech, he said that they had planned 4 phases. There is the phase for the struggle. There is the phase for the liberation. And then there is a phase for shaping South Sudan. And then there will be a welfare state. I don't think that is something that is coming from people who are ignorant. That's coming from really people who sat down and planned. And I want to know, Kir said that this is what the SPLM did. So I would like to believe that these are the intellectuals of SPLM or the policymakers of SPLM. But why would they make such a policy knowing very well that South Sudan belongs to us all?
What does it mean? What does shaping? How do you read the word shaping? Because well, if you are an uninitiated listener, you would say, "Oh, that seems to be a good revolutionary plan." So you liberate your country, you establish your country, you shape your country, i.e., build roads, educate people, as you were saying earlier, indoctrinate people to feel they are one, and then after that have a welfare state. So what do you read into this particular word, which is like shaping South Sudan? What do you see in that?
Okay, you're quite right. Words are open to interpretations, and everybody can read them in their own line. Okay, but in the case of that speech of SPLM, the interpretation has to be within the context of SPLM behavior and SPLM management of the country. Okay, so I'm reading it within the context of SPLM's management. Okay, shaping the country with this. If, as we talked already, here we have had a movement that abuses were condoned.
Yes.
Okay, and people are saying openly we are born to rule. Specific people are saying we are born to rule, and certain people are saying actually in South Sudan there are 3 tribes that matter. All right, there is the top tribe, which is the ruling tribe, and then there is the Riyak tribe, and then there is the Lam tribe. Where do the other 60 fall?
Dinka, Nuer, Shilluk.
Yeah. Where would the other 60 fall? That's the fallacy then. Okay, but the context is that SPLA has been unlawful in doing its things. It has behaved abusively from 1983. Now, if somebody who condones abuses, who condones criminality, who condones tribal behaviors, begins to tell you that I'm going to shape a country, what does that say? That is the context. That is the context. The context is we are going to shape it to what we want, and we know they are abusive, they are criminals, they are tribalists. So I read it within that. I can't read it outside that context. Okay, and it is this that as South Sudanese we have to uproot. We must uproot this mentality. It cannot stand, because it will be fought. It will be fought until it is brought down. And that's why I said at the beginning, it's good for us to begin to open this dialogue. Let me tell you a good example, a story, and this is a reality. You know, in February 2016, there was a program held by ODI. Now, that program, the main speaker was Luka Biong. and then there was I think another academic was lecturing in Juba University called Moro Leben, Dr. Moro Leben, somebody.
Yes.
But the meeting was here in London. It was done in the ODI office just near Sadak. So we went there.
Yeah, I went. I saw.
Did you attend that?
I was at the meeting. Yes.
Okay, good. Now,
yes.
when we came out of that meeting, there was a refreshment being served.
I went there.
Yeah. So I was at that refreshment. With me, you know, I was conversing with Luca Bion, and we then, as usual, somebody, I think, I can't remember whether it was my friend Carlo and a topic came up.
Yeah.
A topic came up and said, what can we do to help in the current situation in our country? And then I said to Byong, I said, look, Byong, let's work together. Let's work together to do something. Do you know what Luca said to me?
What did Luca say?
He pulled back and said, Elhag, I understand what you're saying, and I agree what you're saying, but I will not work against the Dinka government. Now, there was a French lady. We were in the circle in which we were about 5 or 6. There were foreigners, and everybody went quiet.
Was shocked.
Yeah. So this is the mentality of an SPLM intellectual, senior intellectual. Now, when you talk of shaping a country, these are the ideas that are going to shaping South Sudan, and the outcome is what we see in South Sudan at the moment. So I want to thank you very much for coming up with this program, because this program really should develop. All right, let us develop it. Let us contribute to it. We need to open the minds of the people. This is this type of mentality that we need to cleanse from ourselves, so that we can build a country in which, and I think you've lived in that situation I'm talking about. You remember in the 90s when we were fighting here, and you remember when we were in Khartoum in Komboni. We want to live that kind of life. We want to live that type of life. You know, we want to look at ourselves like human beings, like brothers and sisters, not in the world that is being promoted by thoughts like, I can't work again. Even if he's wrong, if your brother is wrong, you can't tell him, you can't save him. That is what is it. And that has shocked me up to today. And when in 2019, I think he gave, when he spoke, I can't remember, 2019, 2018, when he had interview with Jonkor, that even blew me back.
Who is this? Byung again?
Yes, because Byung then spoke the opposite and said, if we don't change our mind, if we don't change this mentality, we will recreate the problem that we broke from Khartoum.
Yeah, I remember him saying that.
Now look at the extremity of the bosses. You begin to know, where does this person, is he acting on principles? A principled person would have one idea and they would pursue it through and through. All right. If you're not principled, then there is no need to lead a country or lead the people. You can't lead. It's only principled people who can bring good. Okay. And so if you have got one person today saying this, tomorrow saying another thing, and that's why the muddle that has happened, and imagine the problems that has come up with, you remember when South Sudan got the independence, this treaty that was signed with Khartoum, whereby, you know, free movement of people, what have you.
The 4 freedoms.
Yeah. Now, honestly speaking, was that the time for us to engage in that kind of a thing? Honestly, was it?
Well, at the time, I mean, we don't want to get into argument here, but at the time, we've just had the Hijlij war. The SPLA had attacked Hijlij out of dispute because there was a big question mark about oil revenue and who it belonged to. And I remember vividly, even around that time, there was a column on the Economist magazine that actually said that, despite the fact that South Sudan has become independent, it's most likely that Sudan actually still owns the oil, which, of course, for the South Sudanese who thought they got their country, was a bombshell. That was a big shock. Mm-hmm. And I think there's been a question mark around the legalities of how much control Sudan had over the oil and how much control South Sudan had. And I think in the aftermath of the Hijlich War, the two were compelled to sit down and negotiate. And I think that was for the first time since independence and since our history, really, that it became clear on paper and legally that the oil belongs to the state of South Sudan. However, because it passes through Sudan, we have to pay them so and so. And you know what happened with that. So we're not going into the the exact agreements that were signed. Of course, some people say they were still skewed in favor of Sudan and against South Sudan. And that's, of course, something that could be debated. But nevertheless, a line was drawn from there that made it very clear that oil belonged to South Sudan. Also, internationally, there was pressure on both sides that the problems of Sudan and South Sudan were intractable and that there was a need for cooperation between the two. So I think I see it from that context. But I totally see what you are saying, because to this day, Sudan is still the biggest threat to South Sudan, and is going to remain so for years to come. But if anything has changed, it's because the new Sudanese government seem to be completely beating a different drum now to what historically the North Sudanese have been doing. But you cannot be certain about that. So yeah, of course, that agreement did not necessarily favor South Sudan. And very well, you mentioned Kafia Kinji, which is still occupied by them. Abyei is still occupied by the North. So we still have border demarcation to make. So there are still disputes going. And I really totally agree with you that was that the right time to do it? Was that the right time to do it?
Yeah, and the border issues were, again, it's not a digression, we'll come back. The border issues were, again, highlights the naivety of our so-called leaders. The so-called Hijlich was clearly part of South Sudan until 2005 when the agreement was signed. Again, it was Riek Machar who withdrew the Southern administration out of Hijlich. For whatever reasons that up to today I cannot understand. Withdrew the Southern administration and allowed the Khartoum administration to set itself, claiming that part after 2015. Why did they do that? What was behind that?
I think this is where I totally agree with you, because what we need in South Sudan, as elsewhere in Africa, is a situation where the government is there because of the people. The government should be our representative. We should not be the subjects of the government, as is the case now in South Sudan. So if our leaders were really answerable to us, do you think they could have done all these things? Do you think so many unilateral decisions by individual politicians that have huge consequences on our country, do you think they would be made by individuals? They wouldn't. So it's this chaos that the people of South Sudan are so disempowered, that we don't have any control of our leaders, that is really causing this situation. And I agree with you to a large extent that we failed to demarcate between politics and militarism after we came out of the war in 2005. Had there been a very, very clear demarcation where now if you're going to become a civilian, even though you are a liberator and a fighter, you now have to leave your uniform behind and become a politician. If you want to stay in the army, you go to the barracks. And then it's up for the people now to elect their representatives and be accountable to, and that did not happen.
Yeah.
It happened verbally, it happened on paper, but in practice, it did not happen. Militarism remained, and I think militarism threatened us, threatened people. You get shot, you get thrown out of the country, you get abused, and therefore decisions will be made without the South Sudanese people's consent. And this is just going to continue. And until South Sudanese could come together at some point, and this is what I really wanted to bring up as well, if you do not mind. I don't want to derail your trail of thought. But what I wanted to say is, you are talking about the way the elite are behaving, especially really without covering it. There is an issue of ethnic divide in South Sudan. And we were talking about how the Dinka, the Nuer, and the Shilluk, well, Nuer and Shilluk to a lesser extent in your view, and generally from everybody's view, that the Dinka control everything, but they give some leeway to the Nuer and Shilluk. And maybe, from what you said, not to anyone else. And they want to shape the country in that way. That's one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is that there is a mistrust, and there is we moved away from the situation where me and you were in Kamboni, and we always said Junubin were South Sudanese. And I spoke Dinka at home. I'm sure you spoke your language at home. You come from the Yei district. I think you said you are Lubara speaking, right? You told me once before. Yeah. So you might have spoken Lubara at home, but when you saw me at school, it really, the fact that you spoke Lubara and I spoke a different language did not trigger in your mind any difference between me and you. And I remember we were taken to school. My father was a member of this Southern Front, and most of our friends were diverse. You know, our best friends were the children of Lubari Ramba, Clement Mboro, Hilary Lugali, and things like that, Joshua Day. We were diverse. Sometimes we'd be taken in one van to school, and we just saw ourselves as people. So I totally agree that we had that stage, and then we are now in this stage. So what I want you to talk about, what happened between then, let's pick a date, 1968 in Kamboni, yeah, to now 2021, and how far apart we have become. Not only just far apart in thoughts and hopes and stuff like that, but also the abuses that we have done to each other. How did we end up here? And I want you to talk with, actually, you said we should debate honestly. So I want you to talk about there were consequential events, major events that happened along the way. So, for example, after we had the Addis Ababa Agreement, we enjoyed a measure of freedom in South Sudan. We elected our own government. We fell out in Juba. We fell out, and we couldn't talk to each other at some point. So by the time we went to war in 1983, we were not the South Sudanese that signed the agreement together in 1972. We had changed. We had turned against each other. And then we went to war, and within a year, the SPLA has fractured along lines that could be said Dinka Nuer. And so those are major events in our history. And in my view, and I've written about this, we have not spoken about those things. We have not resolved them. We have not cleansed our hearts about them. And basically went into this trajectory. So how did we end up here, and how much responsibility should our leaders accept, or how much responsibility is actually shared between the people themselves?
You've opened up a whole can of worms.
Thank you.
Because, and I say can of worms because, as you rightly put it, say people don't want to talk about it. And it's good that we need to talk about it. You know, we must remember that when the Addis Ababa Agreement was signed in 1972, not all Southern Sudanese agreed with the agreement. Okay?
I know very well, because my father was.
I know, yeah, your father was, and there was, from my side also, there are a lot of people from my side, all right? And some of them prominent, and even from my wife's side. And from my wife's side, I can give you a good example is, their uncle is Alec Batala, who remained in the bush, didn't come out until he died.
He was a hero. He was one of the first people to shoot.
So Addis Ababa was not a consensus agreement. It was not an agreement that was accepted. But the good thing that came out of it was, although people did not agree with it in totality, people remained civil. People remained civil. They talked about their disagreement, but they never vilified those who went in.
That's right.
Now, the crux of the matter starts with the high executive government that emerged from the agreement of 1972. Now, up to that point, and remember very well, Abel Aller was on the side of the government, negotiating for Nimeri's government.
That's right.
Okay? But although there were opponents in the talks with Lagu, when they came inside, Lagu willfully handed power to him. And I think that's something noble. Realizing that he was a military person, he needed to keep the army. He could have his brother, Abel Aller, manage the affairs. Okay? And this is where things started getting bad. Aller was controlled by the Arabs, all right? And he was now doing things with the High Executive Council, which were contrary to the wishes and feelings of South Sudanese. And if you remember, there were a couple of mutinies, Anyanya 1 mutinies from 1972 until the agreement was abrogated. There have been a number of mutinies. And those mutinies were all because of the fact that Abel Aller was promoting the Khartoum agenda rather than the South Sudanese agenda. And within that period, late Justin Yach was very prominent. Remember, there was a time when Justin Yach was violently threatening people with a pistol. And he became the symbol of Allier's group. Force was what he could only exude to get what they want. Now, critically, Abel Aller created a mini politics of identity similar to what we have right now in a huge proportion. Now, let me then go back to make it clearer. When Abel Aller was the president, he made sure, because he could not have control of the army, because the army is controlled from Khartoum by the Arabs, he made sure he was in full control of the police, which was regional. He brought General Reuben March, Major General Reuben March of the police. He first brought him and then promoted him quickly and became Major General. And then Reuben March monopolized the entire police force, although there was influence from. There was almost 60% of the police officers in South Sudan were from Dinkabur. And they formed what was called Difa Medeni. That Difa Medeni...
Civil defense.
Yeah. That Difa Medeni, Mawan, I lived it, I saw it with my own eyes. I could not believe it. Where people brought people brought from cattle camp, made policemen without a language to interact with the South Sudanese populace in the towns. They even did not know Arabic. How do you do that? That was the beginning of identity politics. So Abel Alier is at the heart of it. Then Abel Alier, Justin Yach, the current leader of the Young Council of Elders, Ambrose Ring, was the Minister of Commerce. They came out with that statement that we, the young, sorry, Mawan, I don't like calling the name Dinka because I like the traditional name. I like calling the young. So, so if
it's not offensive. No, because, I understand
because the Dinka is just is not really original.
It's a corrupted Arabic. It's corrupted Arabic word. Yeah.
So they came up with that when these people uttered that we will rule you for 50 years openly in the parliament. Justin Yach said it. He was supported by those of Bona Malwal, those of Ambrose Ring. That is when the cat was out of the bag and Southern Sudanese politics became nasty and hostility began to develop. In Juba, in Konyo Konyo, buying a meat became an issue. The Mundaris and the Dinkabor were now fighting everywhere. And Abel continued, just like now, promoting identity politics. And there was a leaflet, a booklet which was produced, which showed that over 90% of the positions in the government were given to one ethnic group. And that became the trigger, which that book was written by Lago, and it was used in the elections. And the sentiments of
the case for the division. I remember the book.
Yeah, the sentiments. And that is what broke the unity of South Sudanese. From that time, South Sudanese lost it. Now, at the back of that, SPLM emerged in 1983 straight away from that politics. And a lot of the people, unfortunately, went to SPLM to avenge.
That's the way it was perceived.
No, because it was said. There are anecdotal reports of people saying things which are noted. You know, they said, we came because of you. But, and it is understandable, people can express those feelings in their head, but what they missed was that to ask, why did Kokora happen? In an objective way. But the elites just were so angry, they didn't want to rationalize, because if they rationalized it, we would not be in the same situation now. The feelings that brought Kokora are now the feelings pursued by some people for independence. Some people are saying now South Sudan should be broken. They're not different feelings, you know? And that's why I'm saying, unless, and I would like to commend you for bringing this program, because this program will make us talk about these realities. We are human beings. When we make mistakes, we ought to put our hands up and say, yes, I did that, I'm sorry, forgive me, I won't repeat it, let's have a rule for it, and we move forward. We need to have that. And so our development can only come once we have cleansed ourselves of these evil ideologies that have been impacted on us. You know, just as people say, if you let yourself be directed by group pressure, you are likely going to end up in a ditch. Do what you think is right. And That's why I ask my fellow brothers and sisters from the other ethnicities, please do what is right. And if I'm wrong, condemn me. Don't support me. I tell my people that. Don't support me because I'm one of you, because that would be the route to destruction. And so the current situation that we are facing is the bigger picture of the situations that we're in the South Sudanese
A long time ago,
regional
4
government.
decades, 5 decades ago.
There you are. And this is why it's important to address the root causes.
So if you are saying that they're so entrenched and so old, why do we have hope at all? And if you have hope, how do you think we would begin to restore South Sudan now?
Oh yes, I have hope. I've no doubt. I've no doubt in South Sudanese at all. And even in some of the communities that are driving this policy, I have hope in them. I have hope in them. Mawan, a human being is not a bad person, and a human being is not a good person. A human being is a human being. In us all, we have got all the facets of life in us. There is the good in us, the bad in us, the what in us, but at the end of the day, there is that human feeling of we are human. Okay? People make mistakes. People who pursue identity politics pursue it because they want to benefit out of it, selfishly, not thinking about their own people, not thinking about the well-being of the others. So I have hope that programs like the ones we are talking in right now can begin to open minds, and people change. People are not closed up or iron casted not to get out from their situation. Once they know and understand the situation, they will change. They will change. There's no doubt about that. And I have hope in all the South Sudanese coming to a good thing. And that's why I said these root causes must be really addressed, and they have to be addressed by, let's have the conversations going. Let's have the talks going. Let's unpack all these historical things. If it's me, tell me, Mawan, tell me that Alhaji, you have done this and that and that. If it is wrong, and you said, I'm sorry. We move forward. We have to do that. We have to do that for the sake of our children. We have to do it for the sake of our people. We must be realistic. We can't be fake. There can be no faker in this. And that's why I've no qualms at all of confronting somebody and telling them that you're wrong in doing this. And that's why I can say those of Ambrose Ring, those of the JCE, those people who are with us in London, what they are doing in Juba is wrong. And they must be held accountable to it. There's no way, that we allowed ourselves in a country with all the resources and everything.
Yeah.
Some few people who have not even got our mandate, they haven't even got our mandate, all right? Destroy the country, and then now they want to destroy us on top of it. No. The weapon is the word. The spoken word is so powerful than the bullet. And Kir will learn about it later. Or the current people in Juba, as I said, they will come to know that whatever they're doing now, this is only short-lived. Because you've seen it with Gaddafi, was calling himself the king of the kings. And so
the end will come to everyone.
We must have hope. We must have hope on the people of South Sudan. All the people of South Sudan are not bad. They are not bad. Only few rotten apples managed to get to position of power to create the situation we're in. If there were only few people among these people who promote identity politics who stood and said, no, this idea is wrong, you can't do it. What about the other people? If it was done to us, would you like it? I think the situation would have been different. And so we can't lose hope. We can't lose hope. We can be in a darker place, but we can get out of it. And we can get out. And you are working towards that now by bringing up this program. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alhaj. We are drawing towards closing this program now. Unless you have a quick message, bearing in mind that we are going to meet again in about a month's time. If we receive questions for you, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions to expand the debate, then we'll meet again. But before then, if you have anything, final message, maybe something you might have forgotten to say, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just recap that. I think what's important really, it's, and you have opened it up. You've opened up the issue of the military and what have you. We really need to start now thinking bigger about what country do we really want. And when we think about that country that we want, we must not think about it in terms of our own identities. We must think about it about being inclusive of everyone. Everyone matters. Everyone matters. What has happened to us must be a lesson for us to build a very good society after that. The opposite of what's going out in Juba must be what we all work for, and we should continue to work for that. That's what I can say at the moment.
Thank you very much, my brother Elhag Paul, and we'll meet again soon. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation as well. Hello, I am Maud Mortad, and this is South Sudan Footprints, where we discuss topical South Sudanese issues with influential personalities. Our guests are the ones who set the agenda because they decide what is to be discussed. Please join us in listening to our knowledgeable guests and ensure to join the discussion by making your voice heard. Leave a question or a comment on our Facebook page. In the next episode, our guests will return to answer your questions. Thank you very much for watching South Sudan Footprints.